And I'm an interviewer for the Public Library of Hamilton County in Cincinnati. Through the Library of Congress program of oral history, we've got a wonderful project going here. And today I'm interviewing Al Wiggershaus, who's a friend of mine. And it's a privilege to have the opportunity to talk with Al. Our camera operator is Dennis Daly. He's one of the aces here in our great history department of the Public Library. And Al, well, this is the 19th of July. I better put that in there. Right. Okay. 2007. Think we'd ever live that long?
Yeah. we got to add a few more to it.
Oh, absolutely. We've got a long way to go yet. Well, Al, it's just a pleasure, and you and I have known each other for about a year, maybe, and having breakfast the first Friday of every month out at the Perkins Pancakes is always a great time, and it's a wonderful experience to get to know all these wonderful fellows like you. Where were you born, Al?
Cincinnati, Ohio.
What?
Right up there in the Christ Hospital on Ohio Avenue.
Oh, yes.
And Ohio Avenue goes down to Clifton.
Sure. And
that might be considered Clifton Heights. It might be considered Mohawk or over the Rhine. It's right behind Philippus Church.
Right.
North of Philippus Church.
Sure, take your choice. Tell me about your family. You had brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I was, like I say, I was born there on Ohio Avenue, and then we moved to 2208 Wheeler Street, which is Clifton Heights, and I have one sister and one brother.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Where did you go to elementary school, Al?
I went to Fairview School.
Okay.
Yeah, Fairview was 2 blocks away up on Warner Street.
Sure, and you walked back and forth?
Walked to school.
Absolutely.
And Hughes High School was a couple more blocks further north. So.
You went to the famous Hughes High School?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. In your early childhood, tell me, what was it like to be born in the 1920s, and what do you remember about that?
Well, the only thing I remember is there was a depression on.
Right.
And really, I didn't really realize all the things we didn't have, which I think is good.
Yes.
Because you didn't develop that habit of wanting everything there was out there.
And expecting it to be given to you, right? That's right.
So I don't have any regrets about living through that.
Oh, I should say not. I feel the same.
I know we got our food in a bushel basket that was delivered once a week, I think. And Coors Dairy, incidentally, gave us a quart of milk every now and then for free.
I'll be darned. How about
was delivered.
That?
So
you didn't happen to know Barney Kroger, did you?
No, I didn't know. No, but and my dad did all kind of odd jobs. He was a machinist, and he was out of work.
Right.
And my mother went out scrubbing floors. So, and we moved. We had a house that was on it was the level of the street, but there was 2 rooms down, what I would call like down and behind in the basement. Mm-hmm. So we moved down there and rented out the top.
Oh yeah,
the good rooms.
Right.
And that's how they made ends meet.
Made ends meet. Well, you know, that is so true about those times, and people today say, "Oh, it must have been terrible, just horrible." Well, it was for some people, but you know, we worked hard, and our parents produced and kept things going. And now, you went on to Hughes High School. Did you have any particular activities or hobbies or interests in high school?
Yes, I was. I guess I was an average student, but not in English and math. But I excelled in all the manual arts. I had 2 years of cabinet making, I had 1 year of pattern making and foundry.
Wow.
I had 1 year of machine shop
Invaluable experience.
and 2 years of mechanical drawing and 1 year of architectural drawing. And each one of those teachers, I really did like them, and
Yes.
they recommended me for jobs
Oh.
and other things. But I got along really well, and that's what, actually, I'm assuming that's what helped me in the Marine Corps when it come time to decide who's going to be shipped to where.
Right, exactly, exactly.
Because some of the people that I went in with, one of them, Darrell Smith, is buried on Okinawa. He didn't have any shops, so I'm assuming when the interviewer looked at his papers and sent him to the infantry and sent me to school,
Right.
that was the difference.
Absolutely, very, very, very fortunate. Well, so going through high school, then let's see, you would have been the class of 1943?
1943, yes.
1943, right smack dab in the middle of the war. And so when you got to the end of your high school experience, how did you decide about the service that you were going
I
to?
spent all those years while I was in high school, planning on going in the Navy. And I really wanted to get in submarines, which would have been a big mistake. Later on, I got in a submarine, and I realized, no,
This
is
wasn't
not for
what
me.
you wanted.
No, but anyway, that was my plans. And then my cousin, John Bolton, he came home from the Marine Corps with those blues on.
Oh, boy.
And I said to him, you think I could get in the Marine Corps? He says, sure. But I was skinny. I was really underweight. And I didn't figure I could. And I never participated in any sports because I worked every day after school. I had a paper route.
Right.
And I did other things also, but I was always working. Never had time for sports, and I wasn't good at sports. But anyway, so I wasn't a muscle man. And I hesitated. He said, you can make it, no problem.
Now, you were tall.
Yeah, I was plenty tall, but I
Yeah.
was skinny.
Right.
And I went, before I went down to enlist, I ate a bunch of bananas. Thought I'd boost my weight.
You're going to bulk up.
They took me right in. The only difference was that I wasn't old enough. I was 17. Brought the papers home. Mom and I and Dad went up to Al Hughey, the realtor, and he notarized them, and I took them down. And July the 5th, I was in there. But I had graduated on June the 16th from Hughes High School. On the 22nd of June, I started at the Gas and Electric Company in the tree trimming department as a brushman.
How about
That's
that?
sweeping the streets for the
Right.
tree trimmers. And July the 5th, I was in the Marine Corps.
How about that? Where did they send you?
Sent me to Paris Island,
Okay, basic training.
basic training, and then they interviewed us to see what our talents were, I guess. And they asked me if I wanted to go to school, and I says yes. And they said, well, we'll send you to Aviation Machinist Mate School at Memphis. Well, the school was full. So I had to go to Cherry Point, which is the air station, and got 30 days mess duty while I was waiting to go to Memphis. Then I was shipped to Memphis. When we got there, they fed us a meal, and then they gave us a white coat and pants. What are these for? You're on mess duty.
Oh, brother.
Another 30 days mess duty.
Oh, brother.
So that put me behind all my friends that had enlisted with me and had already on their way. Some of them were already on their way overseas.
Wow.
But so that's 2 months right there out of boot camp. I'm on mess duty. Then 6 months of school. And
Now that schooling, that was pretty intense stuff, wasn't
Yes,
it?
that was really, and it was really good. They know how to teach.
Right.
And they had their engines that were cut in half. You could see what happened. And it was just, of course, it was easy for me. That was the thing.
Sure. You adapted to that sort of thing. You had that inner strength and knowledge about and feel for things. Now this was aircraft.
Aviation machinist mate is what it was called. It was a mechanic.
Yeah.
And the thing I didn't excel at is Morse code. We had to do that with flags, with a light,
Yeah.
and with the key, da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And if we didn't do a certain amount of words per minute, we didn't get to go on weekend pass.
Oh.
So I missed a couple weekends trying to get through there.
Well, that was that. I know. I had some experience with that myself in the Navy, and that was it was demanding. You really had to concentrate on what you were doing, and it took a lot of inner strength to make it work. Well, now, so here you are working as an aviation mech, and how long were you at Cherry Point?
Well, a year or so. Let's see. I can't add it up. That was, we graduated in '44.
Okay.
May of '44 from Memphis.
Okay, from Memphis.
Then I was sent to Kinston, North Carolina.
Oh,
J.B. Moore was our commanding officer. That would be like in May or June of
right,
44.
Mm-hmm.
And we stayed there, and I don't know exactly when we left there, but in December of '44, we had a new commanding officer, and we were at Cherry Point. And that new commanding officer was Henry Stuckert Miller. Henry, and I didn't know this at the time. I knew nothing about the officers, didn't even know any of their names to amount to anything. But Henry was the executive officer for Boynton's outfit, VMF 214.
Pappy Boynton.
And then he brought along with him a lot of new captains, and all these captains were friends of his that were either in that squadron with him or in the air group over there when they were, the Solomons and Rabal and everything, where Boynton did all his flying. But you don't really get to know the officers. They weren't supposed to fraternize with us, and they didn't. We would just start the planes and get them ready and fill out the yellow sheet, and then they would sign it and take off. And then when they come back, they put their comments down and sign it, and then we would have to make corrections.
Sure. They give you a report of how they related with the performance of the plane.
Yeah, if there was anything they didn't like,
sure,
or didn't work properly, they'd mark it down.
Well, tell us about that shotgun starting. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, the Corsair did not have an electric starter. It had a starter that was, it's like you've had these little toys where you push the a little propeller forward on a twisted thing, and the propeller would spin.
Sure.
Okay, so what you have to do to start a plane, you have to set your mixture control and your throttle to just the right spot for a cold start, and then you have to get the propeller to spin.
Sure.
So the starter was was a big spring that was with a breech on the back of it, and it was right outside of the cockpit. You could unlock the door and unlock the breech, put a shotgun shell in it, lock it back up, close the door, and have everything ready, and you hit the button, you just bang, and it would fire,
How
and
about
the
that?
concussion or the pressure from the shell
Yeah,
would take this spring and shoot it forward, and that would turn then,
turn that propeller.
and that would turn the propeller, and you had to catch it.
Yeah.
And then a cold morning, the place would be littered with shotgun shells.
Oh, I'll bet, I'll
Yeah.
bet. And that was a big propeller on that,
Yeah, it was
on
a
that
big
hog.
It
That
was.
F4U hog, that was a big plane.
Yeah, and then if you ran out of shells, what would you do?
Okay, that's a good question. I'll bet you've got the answer.
Yeah, we ran out of shells several times. We had a large slingshot made out of a bungee cord,
Uh-huh,
about an inch diameter bungee cord that was maybe 20 feet long with a rope on the end. And it was fastened to a hood that was fastened, that you put over the propeller. Now you got to picture the propeller as 3 blades.
yeah.
So the one blade is sticking straight up, and you put the hood over it. Well, you wouldn't have it sticking straight up, it'd be to the side. The one blade that was straight down, the plane captain would have to stand and hold that.
Oh, brother.
So you would hold that, and then you'd get maybe 10 guys on this rope and 10 guys on that rope, like a big Y,
Yeah,
and they would stretch it out, and they'd have that under tension. Now, you didn't have too much of a problem. You just had to make sure that when you let go, that you went backwards instead of forwards. And when everything was ready and the guy hollered okay, and he had everything in the cockpit set properly, you let it go and it would spin that propeller.
isn't that something? Boy, talk about Yankee ingenuity.
It didn't happen very often, but it did happen. We had
Yeah.
it. And it's just, I thought it was interesting because,
Oh, I should say.
Yeah.
I should say. People don't know about things like that. Well, now, did you go to the South Pacific?
yeah.
Tell me about that. How did you get out there?
Well, we went, well, before we had, those were Corsairs we had there at Cherry Point.
Right.
Then, when Henry Miller came, then in April, we got new F7Fs.
Mm-hmm.
And then in June, that would be what, June of '45, we got a furlough and we came back and we went on a train ride to El Centro, California, getting ready to go overseas.
Right.
June of '45.
That was hot in El Centro.
El Centro is a desert, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we worked on the planes early in the morning and in the evening, and we actually had to put some of our tools in a bucket of water. It was so hot there.
Keep them cool. Sure.
To keep them cool.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah. I imagine that desert out there, that got up well over 100 degrees.
yeah, one of the things I wanted to tell you that I neglected to say is one of our duties in the morning to get the planes ready was to pull the props through. Now, do you know why you had to pull them through?
Well, yeah, I know, but you tell us about it. That's important.
Well, because the engine is a radial engine, and the cylinders on the bottom would be, the oil in the engine would leak down
Yeah.
and fill the cylinder head. If the piston was in a combustion stroke and there was oil in there, your intake valve was closed and your exhaust valve was closed. That means that the oil had no place to go. When you pulled it, you couldn't move it.
Mm-hmm.
And naturally, if you tried to start it with a shotgun shell, you're going to do damage to that cylinder.
Right.
So the only way to avoid that is try to pull it by hand, and if it wouldn't pull, that meant the oil was in there. Then you had to push it in the other direction so that one of the valves would open up,
Mm-hmm.
intake or exhaust. and then oil would come out, and then you'd try it again. And then you just pulled it through till the oil stopped running out.
Right.
And, but that was the first thing you did when you came out to your plane, you got hold of it. We usually helped each other out. If you were my buddy, I'd help you pull your prop through, and you'd help me pull mine through.
Yeah.
And then the next thing was to check for water in the gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a valve that we opened up, and you let the gasoline run in your hand, and you'd see the bubbles, and you'd let it run until there were no more bubbles. Then you shut it off. And you know what the name of the valve was?
No.
The Lunkenheimer.
Oh my gosh, right here in Cincinnati.
Right? Yeah, I'll never forget that.
What do you know about that? Right over there on
Beekman Street.
Yeah, right. Lunkenheimer, I should
Yeah.
say. Well, and of course the family shortened the name to Lunken, you know, and the Lunken Airport on the east
Right?
side.
I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, Abby Lunken began Lunken Airport, by 1927, 1928. And that's been in existence over there ever since. That's why they call it Lunken Airport. He was a Lunkenheimer.
Yeah, one of the things that we did when we got to El Centro, one of the changes we made was new at that time was we put a valve in, and I can't remember what it's called. It went for a G suit. In other words, you know what a G suit is? The G suit had pockets in the legs, and in your thighs,
Yeah.
in your chest, and in your arms, and it was hooked up to a vacuum. And when the pilot went in a dive, this vacuum would blow,
Inflate.
fill up
Yeah.
put pressure on your different parts of your body, so your blood would stay
Sure.
in your.
So you wouldn't black out.
So you wouldn't black out. And
Absolutely.
we installed that in that plane.
I'll be darned. Now, as a mechanic and working on the planes like that, you just what kind of clothes did you have? Did you have
Dungarees. We had
dungarees?
dungarees. We washed them in gasoline.
Good old Navy dungarees, bell bottoms.
They weren't bell
They
bottoms.
weren't bell bottoms.
They were herringbone is what we called them. Kind of gray green. But
Sure. Now, did you wear? You didn't wear a white cap, did you? A Navy cap.
No, Marine Corps.
Sure.
They
Okay.
had a white cap.
No, of course not. Well, that's what we like to talk about. Get those details out.
No.
Well, that must have been very, very interesting duty, and of course you were imbued with the Marine spirit through your basic training and everything. You were gung-ho guy.
Yeah, somewhat. I guess I was. I was pretty naive, young kid.
Well, you were so young, my gosh.
Yeah, I did a lot of dumb things that, should have got me into real trouble, but I didn't get into
Got
trouble.
any funny stories you want to relate
Well,
about something like that?
Well, we did. We went over. Actually, the two dates they dropped the bomb on the 6th and the 9th, didn't they?
August 1945.
Yeah, and we loaded up and left August the 24th from San Diego.
Okay.
And the carrier we was on was the USS Windham Bay, and we went first to Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
And we arrived in Pearl Harbor on the 2nd of September. That was the day the Japanese signed the treaty.
How about that? Now you were carrying a squadron of planes,
A squadron of planes, yeah.
F7F.
Yeah, now Henry Miller didn't go, and some of the old timers
Oh,
didn't go either.
we lost your microphone. Just squeeze that and attach it onto your shirt there. There you
Okay.
go. That helps. That helps.
So
So 2nd of September is when you arrived in Pearl.
Pearl, yeah.
How about that?
Then I went, the only thing I remember, I don't remember anything about the war being, the surrender or anything like that. I don't know if we had newspapers or anything, or how the word got out, but I remember getting on a streetcar going to the Royal Hawaiian Hotel
Right.
and swimming in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, right there on
I had to
Waikiki.
get in that Pacific Ocean so I could say I was in the ocean.
Absolutely.
And-
Waikiki Beach.
Yeah.
Well,
And that then back onto the ship, and we were headed for Guam. We arrived in Guam at Okinawa Bay, Guam, on the 15th of September. On the 20th of September, we flew from Guam to Iwo Jima. Now, the only people that flew were the pilots, and we had one R4D. That's a transport plane. We had all the plane captains in there, and the navigator was in there. So the pilots had to stay behind us or alongside of us as we flew.
right.
And then when we landed on Iwo, of course, I had to get on up to Suribachi.
Absolutely. Yeah.
My cousin had landed on Iwo. That's the one that I told you about that came home with the blues. Well, he was in the second wave on Yellow Beach 1.
Wow.
That's right below Suribachi.
Sure.
And
That was February of
so I had to go.
1944.
I had to go see where that was, and I had to, and it was all black sand, and I had to get up on top of Suribachi, and I climbed up there and looked in the volcano and come down.
How about that?
And I told you about the dumb things I did.
Right.
Well, I'm coming back, and there is a beautiful shell laying there, and I thought, man, that is neat. And I picked that sucker up, and I carried that back to the line. One of the officers saw me carrying that, and he said, "What are you doing?" I got chewed out really good.
I'll bet.
But
Was it a live shell?
I had no idea.
Unexploded,
That's-
obviously.
you know, whatever it was, I thought it would make a nice souvenir.
Oh, yeah, right.
But those are the kind of things that I say I was naive and
Well, you know, we all did things like that, though. We all were young and well, not necessarily foolish, but inexperienced, so to speak.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about Pappy Boyington and his Black Sheep Squadron. Did you ever see any of those guys?
yeah, several of our captains, but I didn't know this. They were just officers. I didn't know their names or
Sure.
anything. I didn't know anything about Boyington or what our officers were involved in
Right.
before they came to our squadron.
Right.
Even when they were in there, there were no communications with them.
Yeah, and you know, guys were pretty modest. You know, they didn't talk about too
No,
much.
there was nothing being said about that.
No, that's right.
I knew nothing.
And you know, that's an interesting thing about World War II, was the security of information, which was so important to our victory, because there wasn't a lot of, not like today, you know, we've got reporters embedded out there in Iraq and everything, and they're telling you everything about what's going on every minute. But tell me more about your experiences. Did you get any farther south than Iwo?
Yeah, no, well, we went to Iwo and then we flew to Okinawa.
Okay.
I'm assuming it was 4 hours from Guam to Iwo and then another 4 the next day to Okinawa, and we landed on a little airstrip. It was called a Wasi airstrip. That would be facing Buckner Bay. That would be on the east side of Okinawa, toward down to the bottom of it.
Right.
And
What was the mission of the squadron? What were they supposed to do?
well, we replaced VMF 312. They had Corsairs, and of course they had been in the war. VMF 312 had a real good war record.
Oh, yes.
That's a checkerboard squadron.
Right.
Their Corsairs had checkerboards on the cowling of their plane.
Right.
And there still is a VMF 312. So we replaced them, and they went home. And I guess the mission was just to patrol the coastline, because we had several trips to Japan. The pilots would go up there, and then they'd bring back maybe some pictures that I saw. There's a couple of pilots that would talk to you, but not many.
Right.
I'm not criticizing.
No,
that.
I
It's just that
understand.
just what didn't get friendly with.
Well,
them,
that
you
was
know.
just the way it was.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, did you get to Japan yourself?
Yeah, that's right. Then in February, everything went in reverse. The planes went back, the pilots went back the same route, same way, to fly to Iwo, fly to Guam, load on a carrier, and go back to San Diego.
How about that?
And that was, I'd say 75% of the squadron was old timers, and they all went back, and the rest of us went up to Japan, us younger kids.
So you were in the occupation.
Yep, I was in Oppama Air Base, which is right outside of Yokosuka, which is their big naval base.
Sure.
And I was able to visit while I was there. I saw Yokohama, and I saw Tokyo. I was in Tokyo. And then there was another city called Kamakura. That's where they had a big Buddha, a huge Buddha that was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 stories.
Right.
And
Famous.
You could go inside it. Everybody was inside it. Every serviceman in Japan must have been there, because they all put their name in there.
Isn't that
I
something?
didn't write on it. You know, at that time they were writing Kilroy.
Kilroy.
Was here.
Kilroy was
That
here.
was in there too.
Yeah, right. Well, now, since you were there after the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, did you get to those cities?
No,
Did you get to see any of the
You
damage?
could go out. We were allowed to go anywhere we wanted to, so long as we got back by dark. We weren't allowed out after dark.
Overnight, yeah, I see.
And we could just hop on a train, no tickets necessary, just get on.
Right.
Well, but everybody on the train, by the time we got on the train, I mean, I didn't see a train that ever had an empty seat. Everybody was standing,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And they'd get on the train with anything. They'd have groceries or maybe a bicycle, whatever,
Sure.
whatever they could get. They'd hop on the train. And,
Well, they had a train system, and of course, so much damage had been wrought on the islands that they had to rely on that. Well, did you have any interfacing with Japanese citizens?
oh yeah, yeah.
Tell us
You
about.
said Japanese citizens. You're trying to hit the nail on it. I took my laundry to a place, and there was a girl behind the counter, and naturally she could talk English better than I could Japanese, and only thing you learn is like 1 or 2 words. Ohio means good morning, and I could count Ichi, Ni, San, Shi, Go, Roko, Hichi, Hachi, Kuju. That's up to 10. You had to know that because of the selling of stuff back
Of
and
course,
forth.
of course.
But anyway, then I got to know her pretty well. She had an accordion that like instrument. It was not as big as a regular accordion, on a shelf. And I asked her to play it. She says, "Can't play." Why? It broke. Well, I looked at the bellows, had a hole in it. I says, "I'll fix it." So the next time I came back to her place, I brought with me some, what we called a dope, what we used if you had a bullet hole. The Corsair had fabric on the elevators and on the rudder. And if you got a bullet hole in there, you'd put this dope on it, scrape the paint off, you'd cut a round patch with a pinking shears, put dope on it, put it on there, and when it dried, it shrank.
Right.
So that's what I used to
You
patch
fixed the bellows of her accordion.
yeah. And that got me an invite to her house for dinner one time. And I sat down, and I couldn't eat anything. I mean, those little eyes were staring back at me. So that she wasn't too happy. So she invited me to come back the next week. And when I came back the next week, there was an apple that was sliced like an orange would open up, like 8 different pieces there.
Right.
And there was a knife and a fork, like your kids would have a little toy set.
Sure. Oh, I'll be
And
darned.
I ate that, and she was happy. Oh, that made her feel really good.
Well, of course.
But she had to go to Yokohama to buy that apple.
Isn't that
Get on a
something?
train to get that
Just
apple.
imagine, yeah.
And
you-
I brought in a lot of things. I mean, I brought the eggs, sugar,
Right,
anything I could get out of the candy.
sure.
But
Well, you were an ambassador
yeah,
of goodwill.
well, for everyone it was goodwill. There was a couple that weren't, because
I know.
the guards at the gate, they'd say, "What do you got in there?" I'd say, "It's my laundry." Put it down. They stomp on it,
No kidding. Oh, boy. Yeah.
because they knew darn well there was maybe something else
You
in
were
there.
smuggling something through.
Yeah.
Well, going back to the aircraft that you worked on, and you're talking about the F4U and the fabric on the flaps and so forth. Tell me about that aircraft. That was a heavily armored aircraft. I mean, the skin.
Corsair,
Yeah,
it was really good. Yeah, it was.
it was a strong plane.
It had an
wasn't
R2800 Pratt & Whitney engine,
Right.
and well, it was solid. It was good. The one thing I didn't like about it, they had what they called a Y duct, and that was what if you recall it, the wings came down like this.
Yeah.
Well, right in there was 2 openings, and this Y duct took the air from each side of that and shot it back to the carburetor, and that Y duct had to be taken out in order to get to that Lunkenheimer to drain the
Valve.
gas. So
Yeah.
we had to get in there, and you had to reach up there and feel the latches. There'd be 3 latches, one on each end and one in the back. And then there was a hard rubber covering in there that had a slide in between 2 metal places. It was kind of a tricky
Oh, it
thing to
sounds like it.
get it apart and get it back together again. It was easy to get apart, but getting it back in,
That's right.
and especially when it was old and maybe wrinkled and it wouldn't stay.
Yeah.
But that was the only part that I remember as far as working on it.
What kind of guns did the
Had-
Corsair have?
Had 50 calibers, but I don't know if it had a 20 millimeter or not. See, now, I never touched the guns.
Okay.
We had ordnance people
That's
that
right.
did that.
That's right. That's right.
And,
That was a different
Group.
category.
If they were gonna go on a gunnery run, they would, you'd get the plane ready and they'd go over, and then the ordnance people would take it, and then they'd go from there.
Right. Now, going back to the Grumman F7F, and incidentally, that F, of course, second F, was the designation of Grumman Aircraft
Yeah,
Corporation.
yeah.
I'm trying to visualize, because I was out there too, but I never saw any F7Fs. My ship had F4Fs and
Well, you couldn't have seen them because we didn't get them until April of '45.
that's right. See, that was, by that time, I was back in the on stateside. But that was a beautiful plane. I thought it was a handsome plane, that twin engine and the F7F. And how did you feel about it? Did you feel?
Well, what really I liked about it, I guess, when you would start it up and you'd sit there, it had tricycle landing gear.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there and here you are, 19, 20 years old, you got a big airplane, all yours. I mean, and I couldn't drive an automobile. I didn't know how to drive a car.
How about that?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm running these engines, and you could look to your right and look to your left, and you saw the exhaust. And if it was in the evening, it was even nicer because you had the cockpit all lit up, all the instruments are lighted. And the engine is running, and you just put the throttle forward and the engine would respond. But the other thing that happened, when you run it up, then the nose would dip.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, then you knew you were doing, so it was almost like you were flying. You could make the nose dip by running it. Now, when you had the Corsair, you couldn't see anything because you're sitting like this, with the nose up in front of you.
She was a difficult plane.
Yeah.
She was not an easy plane to fly.
Yeah.
But, and you know, they had to look out, the pilot had to look out like.
And we had to stay, like if we were guiding them in, we had to stay off to the side.
Sure.
Guide them, we'd guide them in.
Yeah.
When they would come in, you would guide them in, and you go like this, that means hold that brake, or hold this brake, that would turn them.
That was the way they
and
turned
then
them.
hold it, and then we'd put the chocks in. You'd have to run in there, put the chocks, make sure you run around, put the other chalk in, then cut the engine, and make sure you don't get hit by the propeller.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's what people who don't have any experience with something like that don't realize. You didn't have anything to turn the plane with. You turned it with putting down the brake and accelerating the other way so she'd go one way or the other. Well, Al, it's fascinating to speak with a person such as you who's had that intense experience, and I can see your love and your feel for that plane, and you're sitting there and revving up the engines and so forth.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a great thing for a young fellow like you. I'm just amazed at what you've done. And you got any more funny stories that you can think of? Something that comes to mind? Interaction with the Marine pilots, or any funny things that they did, or?
No.
Okay.
I have been in contact with a couple of them, and it's really neat. The last one, and he's really in bad physical shape, but on his card, Christmas card, he said, thank you for draining the water out of my gasoline.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? Yeah.
It makes you feel pretty good.
Well, of course you do. Of course it does. Have you had any reunions, any squadron?
I tried to set up a reunion back in '92 and was not really successful. But the recommendation was that we go to the Marine Corps Aviation Association's convention.
Oh, yes.
And they have one every year in a different city. And this one was in New Orleans. Well, in order to do this, you had to belong to that association, which was like $50 or something like that. So that right away put a damper, I am assuming, on a lot of people. But
yes,
I wrote as many as I could find. I found out of our squadron, maybe we had 150 guys. I found 60 by going through the library right down here, the telephone books and writing letters. I got
good
there.
for you.
But anyway, we went to the convention. There was 3 of us there.
How about that?
From our squadron.
How about
it
that?
didn't work out too well.
Right. I know that It gets to it gets to a point, you know, where the fellows keep dropping off, and
I stayed in the reserves, you know, and went away once a year to Port Columbus.
oh, you did?
Yeah, and they had Corsairs up there.
How long did you stay in the reserve?
I stayed until 1951. I went to Port Columbus, and I took my vacation from CG&E at the same time.
Oh, you did?
See, I was single at that time.
Right.
And then I decided to get married, and we were going to get married on the 30th of June, 1950. Well, you know what happened on the 25th? Korean War started.
Oh my goodness, that's right. Oh, so
Korean War started. Captain says, you're not going anywhere. I said, I'm supposed to go on a honeymoon. He says, you just make sure you call in here, let me know where you are. Well, after the honeymoon was over, and that was June the 30th, I think by the end of July, I don't know the exact date, I was in Camp Lejeune with the entire 15th Signal Company here in Cincinnati.
how about that?
Marched right down, I guess we were down Main Street or Vine Street. It was a nice parade. And we left and we went to Camp Lejeune. Then they separated us according to what our MOS was, you know, because our outfit wasn't that efficient. And I got sent back to Cherry Point, which was nice. And in September of 50, then my wife came down and we lived in the town of Newport. And that's halfway between Morehead City Beach and Cherry Point. And my wife kind of enjoyed it, mainly because of the beach was there.
Right.
And Washington, D.C. was
Not too far away.
not too far away, and she had two brothers that lived there.
Oh, that was great.
Yeah.
Well, North Carolina is a beautiful state too,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, yeah. Well, that was just tremendous. I think, you know, what you accomplished, what you contributed, was so important to the war effort. And of course, you were building yourself up as a young man.
Yeah, well, when I had a good job, I could have got another stripe. I was staff sergeant, and they were implying that if I stayed in, I'd get another stripe. And my wife was thinking, this ain't too bad a life, but it really wasn't too good a life when you
Right.
had it. Not a good family life. And I was a power lineman for the gas and electric company, and I was expecting to get more.
Oh, sure. So you came back to Cincinnati when?
That would have been in August of 51, I guess.
51.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I think right after that, I sent my papers in and got out of the reserves.
Got out of the reserves, right. So you didn't have to go to Korea.
No, I didn't go to Korea, no.
Thank goodness for that.
No.
That was a terrible thing. Well, so then you came back to civilian life, and you had the job with CG&E, is that it?
Right, yeah. I was a lineman, and then I became a crew foreman, and a multi-crew foreman, and then a district foreman.
Right.
So, and then I was in charge of the maintenance on the substations, and I had the hot crews that worked on the 345,000 volt tower lines hot.
Oh, wow. Transformers and all that?
No, not transmission lines.
Transmission line.
You don't work on a transformer. You work on the line going into the transformer.
I see.
And but I had the hot crews. I had the regular daily maintenance of all the small things. I did everything from putting a service into a house to building substations to building tower lines.
Wow.
So I had a good variety of work.
Well, you were a valuable A very valuable employee, I can see that.
Well, that's when I say I did it, I was a district supervisor, you understand.
Sure.
The men did the work.
Yeah, of course. But you worked your way up to that.
Yeah, I never, while I was working, I never had built a substation. That was one of my big challenges when I was moved from one district to this bigger district down there, and I was given the responsibility of the substations. And I told that crew foreman, I said, Tom, I don't know anything about a substation except where the gate is. He says, well, I'll tell you what. He says, you come out here and I'll tell you what I need for tomorrow, and then tomorrow morning you tell me what to do.
Right. Oh, how about
That's
that?
the way it was. He was a nice guy.
Nice.
And I went back and made up a list and said, get this ready, get this ready. So when Tom comes tomorrow morning, Tom, do this, that, yeah, okay.
That's great. That's great. Now, did you come back to Clifton Heights?
Clifton Heights, no. My mother lived on University Avenue at the time. She had moved, that would be Coreyville, right next to the Sigma Chi house, right opposite the stadium. At the end of the stadium, there was a horseshoe and there was a power plant right across the street where Mom lived.
I see.
Near Woodside, second house from Woodside on University. She had rented out to students. That's the way Mom made it.
You lost your father?
No, my father was still living.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And they lived there. And that's where I lived when I got married. Then I got married and moved to North College Hill in a small house. And we stayed there for several years. And then I moved to where I am now in College Hill.
Right, right.
Then my wife died in '86.
Oh, dear. That's a long... Oh, she died too young. Yeah. How about your family?
Well, I got a son, Mark, and a daughter Gail and a daughter Kim. So
oh, you're blessed.
They're all here.
Oh, that's just wonderful. Well, you know, you've told a story relating here of history and your intense participation, and of course your pride in the Marine Corps. All of that sort of thing goes together, and this made you a different man. We all came out of World War II for the better, I think. Most of us did.
Yeah. Well,
we learned a lot.
I was lucky. I almost feel like I was on a sightseeing trip.
Right.
Because I've been, you know, in the presence of a lot of special men.
Absolutely.
And I couldn't even carry their ditty bag for them.
Oh,
you know?
well, I don't agree with that. You could, if you were up to it, put up to it, you would.
But I can't say I ever was tested, you know. You wonder what would you have done
What would have been
under
like.
the circumstances
Yeah.
that these, you know all the men that in the Hornet group that
Oh, yes.
are there, and all the experiences they've had, and what I've had is really nothing.
Well,
In comparison.
I won't agree with that, because I know what it was like to be with people who not only fought as I did, but also who supported. And you were a great support, and you were counted upon. You were relied upon to do your job right, and you were properly trained, and you had the spirit and the mental capacity to carry out what was needed to be done, and that was a very important contribution. And,
You know what's interesting when you stop to think of it? 19 years old, and you're sitting in an airplane that maybe costs a couple $100,000.
oh yeah.
And you know you wouldn't put your grandkids in your new car.
Well, I know, of course. I know.
Hey, when I was that age, and I could drive a car.
You couldn't drive a car. You learned to drive a car after the war, huh?
When I started the gas company, I didn't have a driver's license, and what I did, there was an article in the newspaper that said, veterans that want a driver's license, bring your discharge and down we'll give you one. I thought, you know, I might have a car one of these days.
Sure.
And I went and got a driver's license. And that's how I got my driver's license. Never taken a test.
Never took a test. Never had to drive around the block with the instructor or anything.
No, I drove around the block with the senior lineman that I worked with when we went into when I first started. I was on the truck that put in all the services in the new subdivisions.
Oh, yes.
And we went from one house to the next, and then he'd drive out there, and then I'd get in after we did this house, and then I'd get in and stick shift, and I'd drive it to the next house.
Right, right.
There wasn't anything but fields on either side.
I know. You've seen some tremendous changes here, and you've been a part of the building and expansion of Cincinnati. And Al, that's you're just an absolute top-notch citizen. It's an honor to be with you, and I want to thank you for making yourself available and kind of opening up your life. And you know, your family and friends will have an opportunity to see this DVD now, and they'll say,
okay,
well, is that what Al did, for heaven's sake? And they'll be so proud of you, and you're in history, and you're on the record. And
thank you.
And it's an honor and a pleasure, and we thank you again, Al. And I'll see you next Friday or a couple of weeks from now.
First Friday of the month.
First Friday of the month at Perkins Pancakes.
Okay.